Cityscapes with your host, Steve Scrapper Brown. We hope you appreciate everybody listening. We're right here live with Mr. Jeff Lapin. I'll get it right in a minute. Recently retired from the Indianapolis Symphony Orchestra after 44 years on the cello, and has a wealth of anecdotes, history about music, and he's a former teacher of music appreciation at Ivy Tech, also Butler, and we're going to start with saying good afternoon. How are you this afternoon?
I'm fine. I hope my voice can compete with yours on the air.
Yeah. Well, we've been chatting before we started the show, and I found out quite a bit about yourself, and you want to elaborate a little bit more about that?
Well, just quickly, I grew up in Baltimore, and ended up here for college, and lucked out and got in the symphony right out of college, and was with them for 44 years as a cellist. And a few years before retiring, I started teaching. There was an ad for a music appreciation teacher at Ivy Tech. And I went in on a Sunday for an interview and had my first class the following Tuesday. I did that for several years, and then I was asked by the department chair at the Jordan College of Music in Butler to start teaching music appreciation there. And so I've been doing that ever since.
Okay. For all those. But so tell me about your time with the symphony. Tell me, can you give me some, you maybe have some history, some anecdotes that you'd like to share with us?
Well, let's see. I think my favorite things were in the old days performing with Ella Fitzgerald.
Oh.
And let's see, Ethel Merman, of all people, performing with us.
Take it off the board, take it down. Take it
And
down. No, not there.
My most recent memories for the last few decades were doing all the pop concerts with their music director from Richmond, Indiana, Mr. Jack Everly, who's an incredible arranger and conductor and very, very innovative with what he does.
I see. First tones running out through here.
Yeah, I think one of the highlights too is that I have always had the dream of performing with Sergio Mendes and Brazil 66, and when they were with us, I actually got a chance to sing with their conductor, just sitting on the conductor's podium during a break with him playing the guitar and me singing one of their songs. It was called Like a Lover, which was a Brazil 66 hit with Lonnie Hall on the lead vocal there.
Oh, see, there we go. This is history. All this is history. All this is history. Give me one more. Give me one more there.
Okay, let me think as I move closer to the microphone. Is this better now?
That's much better.
Okay,
there
we
we
have
go.
it. Okay, worked with some big names in the classical world too, and I must say that one of my favorite people who has been a close friend for over 40 years is Andre Watts, the pianist.
Oh.
The first time he performed with the ISO, I was a student at Butler, and I had been asked to interview him at the Jewish Community Center for something they called I can't remember the name of it right now. But we have been friends ever since then, and when he is back in town, we get together, and I'm friends with him and his wife, and it was called Symphony Seminar at the Jewish Community Center. Right. And just to have Andre not only be a friend, but I was teaching an IUPUI class called Sounds of the Symphony, and he came to talk with them for the hour class, but there was a big snowstorm, and maybe 3 people showed up. But Andre sat with them for over an hour just playing ditties on the piano and chatting with 3 people out of 40. It was an amazing event. He's a real normal guy. He's not like a stuck-up, classical musician like, of course, we all are.
We all are. So he's a regular guy. He likes to have fun just like everybody.
Oh, exactly, yeah.
Okay. So tell me about, we were talking, as I said, we were talking earlier, and tell me about the classes that you were teaching at both Ivy Tech and Butler.
Okay, at Ivy Tech, when I got the job there, it was a new program they had that was called the Advanced Accelerated Program.
Right.
The majority of students were either former foster kids, abused kids, or first generation graduates in their families.
Right. Right.
They ended up getting an associate degree in 11 months.
Really?
And it's pretty amazing, and I'm still friends with an awful lot of these kids. In fact, I had a couple of them staying at my house over Christmas vacation, which was great this past year. Was doing that for years, and then the department chair at Butler, Lisa Evans Brooks, asked me if I'd be interested in teaching music appreciation at Butler also, and so I started doing that in addition.
Okay. All right. So, well, there's a particular, and you may have touched on this, but I wanted to bring this back out. These were all non-music majors.
Yeah, I had no music majors at all, which makes it a lot more fun. Pardon me. I'm so choked up just thinking about these kids. At Butler, I mean, we're talking like psych majors, pharmacy majors, education majors.
Right.
And like I say to them in the first class, you don't know what you know about music until you find out what you know when I tell you about what you know. And that may not have made sense, but it does to them eventually. And so and I also explain to them, this is music appreciation, not classical music appreciation. So we cover everything, of course, from classical music, but also to Motown and jazz and just about everything. And that's the whole point.
Tell me again about that little anecdote you were speaking of about Phil Spector and a couple of other things that you were saying.
Okay, well, I do a class on Phil Spector, and he had this what you said, and it's true, this wall of sound,
right.
And he would cram as many people into a studio as possible. In fact, I remember the first recording I heard coming out of his lab was the Crystals doing "Be My Babe," or "Then He Kissed Me." That's what it was.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, this sounds like it's recorded in somebody's crowded basement with somebody hand-holding a mic for a Webcore tape recorder. It just had that kind of sound to it.
Right.
And that's the wall of sound. He just crammed as much as he could in.
Mm-hmm.
But then I also do a class or two on Motown.
Right.
Which I love, and I still have all my original 45s and LPs from them, including Meet the Supremes, and all the way up to the Supremes sing country, western, and pop, and do Funny Girl. So anyhow, but in fact, a few years ago, I got to sub with the Detroit Symphony and their cello section, and I had hoped to go to Hitsville where they had done all the recordings,
right.
But I didn't have time to do it, and I hope to go back there. But I just love talking about Motown too, so maybe if people want, I'll come back here and talk about that too.
Well, we're thinking about having you on once a month, just kind of bring us into a lot of different things. Before we go to a break, a lot of people may not be really familiar with the idea of the wall, Phil Spector wall of sound. Let's give them a few. Examples of that. Say, for instance, we talked about the Crystals. You said
Ike and Tina Turner.
I'm trying to think of the name of the song. Was it River Deep Mountain High?
Yes, and then and of course Tina and the Ikettes there. We had the Ronettes with Ronnie Spector, and in fact she actually did a single a couple of years ago with Eddie Money called "Take Me Home Tonight," and so he was singing, "Take Me Home Tonight," and she's in the background going, "Be my little baby."
Yeah, that's it.
That's it.
There. Was it Unchained Melody?
Righteous Brothers.
Yeah,
but the first thing they had, You've Lost That Love and Feeling.
That's it.
It was Bill Medley and great. Well, he was the main voice of the two.
Right.
Bobby. It'll come to me. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
I'm getting old. I can't remember everything.
So why don't we take a little break? In the background, we're playing some of the different recordings from the Gannett Studios that was originally located in Richmond, Indiana, back in the early 20th century. And we're going to come back and we're going to talk about that. We're gonna pull out a few little nuggets out of that era. So this is Cityscapes with your host Steve Scrapper Brown and Mr. Jeff Laban. Be right, Jeff. We're gonna turn the mic over to you. Let's talk about Gannett Studios. Let's talk about their history. What was their first recording?
Well, I'm going to go back before that.
Okay.
It was a bunch of businessmen over in Richmond, Indiana, and I have the notes here. 1872, they decided that they were going to start manufacturing pianos, mainly what were called parlor grands. This was a tradition. I'm being a music, a priest teacher, a history teacher right now, but it was tradition in all families after the main meal that generally the youngest lady in the home, she hadn't been schooled much. She would be home cooking, having babies, things like this, but she had learned how to play keyboard instruments. And so they would have an entertainment time in the family parlor after, say, the Sunday dinner.
Right.
And so it was in the parlor, and they had what eventually became parlor grands. And these people over in Richmond decided they were going to start building parlor grands. The people who came up with the idea, it was the Starr family, and they built not only uprights, like so many of us have or had in our homes or church basements have, but also baby grands and concert grands. And they were all the Starr pianos. So, continuing from that, from making the pianos, they branched out into other furniture, including gramophones. I don't want to say Victrolas, because Victrola is a brand name, but gramophones, the crank up things, and you has the scratchy sounds with the needle you're going along. And so they started manufacturing them, and eventually started manufacturing and had their own recording studio. Their recordings came out of their home in Richmond, Indiana, and they were on the Starr label. But then one of the executives named Jeanette came up with an idea. Why don't we name the label Jeanette? And so I hear laughter in the background. Yes, okay, well, imagine that. So I think there were 4 of these Jeanette people that now had the Jeanette label, and this is the way it was ever since. In fact, if you go on YouTube, and you just put in Gennett, Gennett records, you will find hundreds of recordings. Sometimes they'll have photos of the performing artists.
Right.
Sometimes they'll have of the machine, the gramophone playing them. But it's an amazing inventory of artists that they eventually had there.
Okay. One of the first, we do use notes here. We do use programming notes. It's not like my show where I just kind of riff off everything that I just happen to decide to play. But you talk about one of the first recordings they did was with King Oliver.
Yes.
Okay. A lot of people do not know that Louis Armstrong was part of King Oliver's band.
Yeah. In fact, this was one of the first times in history that we had black and white jazz musicians performing and recording together.
Exactly.
And it turned out that Mr. Armstrong was such a powerful player that they would have him standing farther away from the recording horn. In those days, they didn't have microphones when they first started. These were called acoustic recordings. And so he would stand the farthest behind everybody else, and he was only playing second trumpet on this recording. However, he did develop a pretty good career for that, I must say.
Yes. We started out the program with King Oliver's Creole Jazz Band, Chimes Blues, Ella Fitzgerald and Louis Armstrong stomping at the Savoy, kind of a nod to the Jazz Appreciation Month going on right now, and also Ella Fitzgerald's 100th birthday. Let's keep going here. We've got a lot of storied musicians. Coming through Gannett Studios. We've got Jelly Roll Morton. We've got Bix Beiderbecke. And, of course, Hoagy Carmichael. And you want to elaborate on some of that history?
Well, they had such an amazing inventory of artists. In fact, let me add to that, which you just said.
Please.
Okay, you mentioned Jelly Roll Morton, Bix Beiderbecke, the New Orleans Rhythm Kings, Tommy Dorsey,
Right.
J. Bird Coleman, Jimmy Durante's band and orchestra. Yes, this is before he had his TV show talking about "Good night, Mrs. Calabash," and singing "Dinka Dinka Dinka Doo." I remember that from TV. Guy Lombardo recorded with them, and Lawrence Welk, which is wonderful, you know, well before he became famous as the Polka King on the TV. Also, besides Hoagie Carmichael, Gene Autry did their first what they called a hillbilly record, and it's said to be the birth of country and western music. This is all out of the Richmond studios of Jeanette and the Star Piano Company.
So, okay, yeah, that's quite a bit. Okay, let's talk about. Yeah, you mentioned you hit upon that a little bit, but let's go back and let's talk about the idea that it was one of the first recording studios back, and we're talking about the early 20s, that had integrated recording sessions, and this being in a segregated area, segregated region, segregated country. So things like, and one day they would make recordings with the actual, the KKK, then the next day with Jerry O'Morton or Hoagie Carmichael. Yeah. Can we talk a little bit more about that kind of history?
Well, first off, that Jeanette was really unique in that it didn't lay down the ground rules like Victor and the other big companies in New York who were doing snooty music, classical music.
Right.
So all the soloists and artists with Jeanette could actually do what they had been doing, performing live. So many of them would take the train in from New York or come up from New Orleans or down from Chicago after their Saturday night gigs and record there at the studios. They didn't give a rodents behind about what the skin color was. They cared about whether somebody had good playing chops, and this is how the whole thing came about. It was an amazing thing because supposedly these were the first interracial recordings ever done.
Right. And we all know the rest of the history about that when they got into what they more or less kept everything separate and they called one, they called regular records, and then you had race records.
Oh, in fact, the whole thing with race records,
yes.
Like there was a catalog of Jeanette, of their race records, and grocery stores would have them, but they would be in a box under the counter. And say somebody would come in, and maybe the owner would say, well, would you like to see what we have in race records here? Because they were not out on display with the rest.
Oh, okay.
In fact, something else too, by the way, what they started doing was they had a contract with Sears Roebuck, and they sold a lot of their recordings by the Sears catalog.
Right. Well,
it's quite a history.
Yeah, we need to really talk more about that history because I can see a lot of different, they talk about. I'm sitting here and I'm kind of glancing through a particular piece of a book here that's called Jelly Roll, Biggs and Hoagie, and it talks about Jeanette Studios and the birth of recorded jazz. And you're quite. We're going to talk about a little bit later on in the interview about you're very involved with the jazz community here in Indianapolis. Very involved. So we're going to take another little short break, and we're going to come right back. This is Cityscapes on Jazz City Radio, and we have Mr. Jeff Lapin. Be right back. Okay, you are listening to Jazz City Radio and Cityscapes. We have Mr. Jeff Lapin here with us. And
Turn the music down.
yeah, he's forgetting. We got about a 20-second delay here.
Okay.
So we have Mr. Jeff Lapin here. This is so funny. And he's been talking to us about Jeanette Studios, and they have a very storied history for about 12 years, maybe 12. Something of that nature?
Yeah, well, it goes on farther, but we'll talk about that in a bit, or at the next show if there is one.
Yes, there's gonna be a next show. Yeah, we're gonna. Okay, but wait, since you said that, we'll just talk. We'll just say that Jeff will be back with us on May the 24th. And for those of you who might like to ask him questions or anything, you can text us at 797979 Jazz City, and that'll be your keyword, and that's all lowercase. And if you have questions or comments, so that's 797979 Jazz City is your keyword. And Jeff will be back with us on May the 24th. Let's talk a little bit more about Jeanette Studios over in Richmond, Indiana. Had a very storied. They had whomever who could possibly be in jazz and just recordings in particular. You said you were talking about Gene Autry. Did what was probably considered the first country western. I'll get ready to say CD, but country and western record at Jeanette. I keep wanting to say Jeanette because it's the way it's spelled, but it's actually Jeanette. And can you give us a little bit more history about Jeanette Studios?
Okay, well, as far as Gene Autry, he was what they called one of their hillbilly artists.
Okay.
That has since morphed into C&W. Some of the other things that they started doing near the end of their life were sound effects records.
Right.
And there is one recording with the Hopi Indians. It was recorded in the Grand Canyon. The Riverside Park Skating Rink Orchestra here in Indianapolis. And speeches by William Jennings Bryant, including the 23rd Psalm with string quartet.
Wow.
So they were covering absolutely everything. And in fact, let me read something from this book that you have a copy of there, and here's
Please,
mine. Okay, this is pretty, I think, interesting. Comedy records were easy money for record labels, as consumers were eager to buy anything new on disc, and Jeanette recorded several. Still found in antique stores is the old Jeanette Laughing record, which finds a group of people laughing hysterically at a series of muffed violin solos. Then they also had their Physical Culture exercise package, a 3-record set of 12 exercises set to music, featured enthusiastic instructions from one Charles Nichols, dubbed the New York Physical Director. The Physical Culture record sleeve showed a hefty woman in a slip working out next to her Jeanette phonograph. The exercise collection promised an invigorating workout for the body without dieting, gym grind, or long hours of training. We could use that right now, I think.
So with all this going on, Jeanette, I still want to say Jeanette because of the way it's spelled, Jeanette Records, ceased operation, closed operations in 1934, starting out with hot jazz and ending up with a cool ending.
Yeah, exactly. They, you can't get much cooler than this. They started manufacturing refrigerators.
Refrigerators?
Yes, they had this huge factory in Richmond. It went on for city blocks. And in fact, if you just Google photos for Jeanette Studios or Starr, STARR hyphen Jeanette, GENNETT, you will see photos from these massive factory buildings they had there. By the way, none of them are there anymore. I went over there a couple of weeks ago, and we can get to that maybe the next time, because this is a sad tale.
I think the last time I was in Richmond, Indiana, I know they were talking about how they were trying to bring back that whole area. They were trying to revitalize it. But you're saying that they're not doing anything with it anymore?
Well, they have what's called the Starr Jeanette Foundation.
Okay.
And I just got a mailing from them the other day, and they list that they have 4 officers on their board of directors, and then they have 5 board members. So that is the total. And they are doing what they can to carry on the tradition. They have a Walk of Fame,
Right.
which has plaques with a lot of the artists' names and likenesses on a walkway in the grotto there. But this is where all the buildings had been, but have since been destroyed.
Wow. So in other words, they're just letting the history just kind of evaporate.
Well, I don't know if they're letting it, but it did. And I mean, it's kind of like in downtown Indianapolis here. Like I live downtown in one of the old historic neighborhoods, and so many of the old buildings have been torn down, and everybody's regretting it now. And I'm not sure what the deal was over in Richmond with this huge mammoth factory they had. And I cannot get any answers quite yet, but I am still researching this. So maybe when we get back here in May, I will have more stories to tell about what has happened and what is where.
Okay. Now, for those who are just joining us, we're sitting here speaking with Jeff Lapin, recently retired from the Indianapolis Symphony Orchestra after 44 years, but considering the fact that he is very, very, very versatile, he's also very involved with our jazz community here. One particular person that we're going to start out with. Any memories of Mr. Dave Baker?
Well, I remember, like, I think it was my first or second year in the orchestra, which was like the early 70s, and we used to go out to elementary schools to play concerts.
Right, right.
And one of the pieces that we did was Baker's piece for orchestra called Le Chat qui Pêche, which meant the cat who went fishing.
Really?
And our conductor at the time was this Russian gentleman named Oleg Kovalenko. And, well, let's say he was a little slow on the uptake. And he'd be introducing this piece to these kids, and he would always say, Dave Baker was black. And that's how this started. Pardon me. Anyhow, a friend of mine, in fact, he was one of my cello profs at IU, Gary Hoffman.
Right.
He went to compete in the Tchaikovsky cello competition in Russia, and he played for a contemporary piece, Dave Baker's Cello Sonata, which is an amazing piece. Quite a few years ago, public radio or television in Bloomington, WTIU, did a documentary on Dave, and they actually interviewed me. I'm seen on camera talking about Dave and all of his contributions. So, yeah, just to be associated with something is like that's pretty darn swell.
Yeah, I agree. So, talk to us more about some of your involvements, some of your friends that you've done, some of the friends that you've made in the jazz community. I think you've also appeared with a couple of people.
Yeah, and in fact, a good friend and just lives around the corner from me is our wonderful composer and pianist, Sean Baker. And in fact, I know he's listening to us right now. Hey, Sean. Also, incredible sax and clarinet player and composer Frank Glover. And about 10 years ago now, it's hard to believe it that's long ago, Frank had written a symphony for his quartet and for symphony orchestra, and I was part of the orchestra for it. It was an amazing thing. It was called Abacus. And you need to, in fact, I just got a new copy to give to you all, so you can play this sometime in the future. But it's the most incredible music with symphony orchestra, and Frank asked me to write the liner notes for it. It's on the Owl label, and anyhow, and then Frank is, I think, writing a total symphony for orchestra right now down at his place, hiding in the woods, composing in Bloomington. Probably picking up the spirit of Dave Baker down there.
Yes, a lot of people do. Those who are not familiar with Dave Baker, the reason why we asked him is because he was the dean of music studies at IU. He's dean over music at the IU School of Music, of course. And also, wasn't he also emeritus there?
I think so, but also he has a history with Indy.
Right. Oh, yes.
Which goes back to you.
Yes.
So okay, over to you.
Okay, you're gonna put it on me now. Okay.
Yes, Steve.
All right.
Tell us about your time with Dave Baker.
Dave Baker, yes. Dave Baker was having to meet him first of all by the fact that he and my dad were first and second chair. They were trumpet players, French horn players at Attucks High School, graduating in 1950. And then I had the extreme pleasure and a great surprise of meeting him personally when I was in junior high school, and he was doing the same thing that you were doing, music appreciation, talking about jazz and talking about music in particular. And we struck a nice little conversation. He told me a little couple of my dad's nickname in high school and everything. So,
and what was that?
I think Dad's not gonna appreciate me talking about that. It's called.
We will.
It was molasses. So,
yeah.
I'm serious. So that was their. And so we struck a very good conversation. And every time I got to see him perform, it was always a good, little reunion for us to get together, because I always enjoyed listening to him, doing different things that he did on cello, and you would not think that you could play jazz on cello.
Yeah, in fact,
But
he coached with my teacher, Starker, down there.
Yes.
Yes, who is the dean of cello teachers? Who, he's the cello doctor. He can solve any physical problem you have. I mean, I wouldn't have had my career if it hadn't been for him fixing my physical problems. And so Dave Baker worked with Starker. It was amazing.
Wow. So you've got so much history here. You've got so much history that we cannot do this all in one set. Oh, hey, don't forget, you've got a shout out to make. Memphis, Tennessee.
Oh, Memphis, yes. Jane Rodak called in. Jane and I have known each other by internet for several decades. We are eBay pals. We first met when we were bidding against the same Viewmaster reel that was going back for our childhood, back out east, and we are still in touch. Jane has been a major contributor, a voiceover artist, a voice talent for radio stations, and her significant other was probably the leading harmonica player in the country, if not the world, Pete Peterson. And so Jane just called in, and so as I say to call her, "Hey, hon."
Okay, now see, you can join in on this fun if you text us at 797979 at Jazz City. That's all one word, 797979. Just text and ask questions, and if you have comments, please let us know. And Jeff will be back with us on May the 24th. And you got an idea maybe what we've got little things to talk about. We've got a lot to talk about, and we just can't contain it all in 1 hour. So we're gonna take. No, I don't think we could take. I can take a little break, and we're gonna come back, and we're gonna wrap things up with Jeff, and be right back. Okay, we're back with Jeff Lapen of Indianapolis Symphony Orchestra, and we're gonna come back, and he's gonna come back May the 24th, and we're gonna talk more about Cadet Studios and the fact that there's a lot of information, a lot of maybe relics that are missing from Jeanette Studios.
Yeah, it's. I went over there with a friend of mine. This guy is an old soul named Ryan Turner, and I mean he collects old cylinder recordings and things like this. And we went over there to check out what was still left of the Jeanette Studios, and went to what was supposed to be their museum, but actually was a 3-story furniture store that has a small room that's dedicated to the Jeanette Studios. They have got some photos up, and they sell t-shirts. And on the top floor, they have several of their gramophones and several of the piano shipping cases. And that's about it. And I asked if they could tell me where all the things are, like the recording equipment, the record pressing equipment. They gave me the name of the Star Jeanette Foundation. I emailed them. I finally heard back from someone, and she said, well, we don't know where the stuff is, but we have some photos. And so she said, you might check with the Historical Society here. So I did, and they said, well, we don't know, but we have some photos. But it may be someplace, maybe family members have it. So that's what I'm going to be doing between now and the time we get back on the air here in May. I'm going to be checking this all out.
So we're sitting here with, we've been interviewing Mr. Jeff Lapen, native of Baltimore, Maryland, recently retired from the Indianapolis Symphony Orchestra on cello after 44 years, and He's given us a lot of information, a lot of history, particularly of Jeanette Studios. And we're going to bring him back May the 24th. And maybe make this maybe a once a month visit from him. Maybe we can talk him into that because I've learned quite a bit myself. We've kind of been thinking, kind of pulling different things from a particular book written by Mr. Rick Kennedy, Jelly Roll, Bix, and Hoagie, Jeanette Studios, and the birth of recorded music, recorded jazz, particularly here in Indiana. Our next guest for next week will be Taiwan Garrett of the NAACP, and we'd like to take this opportunity to thank Jeff and coming in, and we hope to see you next time. We'll see you next time, and on here on Cityscapes, and we're gonna make. I think we're gonna make this a regular, make him a regular guest. You know, like the one that pops in, like on the what was something like, say for instance the night show and the Tonight Show.
Works for me.
Yeah.
So like, how about this from the old Popeil commercials at Ronco? But wait, there's more.
Yes. So Jeff, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, look, this has been awesome. Thank you, Steve.
Yeah. So this is Cityscapes right here on Jazz City Radio, where every city's a Jazz City. Jazz City Radio, bringing the world just a little bit closer, one song at a time.